Good morning. Want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know it's a busy Friday as we race towards the end of the year. So we're so excited that y'all are spending a few minutes with us um, so that we can kick off our Friday. My name is Daniela Perry. I serve as the executive director for the Georgia Chamber Foundation and also on the Max Executive Committee. Really excited to have some good friends with Cosby Johnson on the Georgia Chamber team and Tim on the Metro Atlanta Chamber team to talk through this. But wanted to say a special thank you to our anchor investors. All of these organizations are deeply invested in the workforce community in Metro Atlanta. So if you work with these folks, please tell them thank you for their investment and support of workforce in Metro Atlanta. Again, I'm Daniela Perry with the Georgia Chamber Foundation. I think everyone knows Tim and Cosby well. They're staples down at the Capitol, have been doing this for a really long time, and are just great experts and a wealth of knowledge on all things related to legislation and what's going to be at the Capitol. We'll kind of talk through some things with them. Please feel free to put questions in the chat as we go through. Want this to be interactive and make sure it's helpful for y'all as you think about what 2026 looks like because we are so close to being there. I will pause real quick, stop sharing, and first I'll turn it over to um, Tim and Crosby to kind of talk through priorities for your organization around talent and workforce. And Tim, I'll turn it over to you. And just so everyone knows, Tim is also on the Max Executive Committee. Tim, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Daniela. Good to be with you all again. I feel like this is always the marker of the true beginning of my holiday season when we have this. It's sort of like the almost last full week of office time. But yeah, good to be back. Tim Cairl, I'm Vice President for Talent at the Metro Atlanta Chamber. So I lead our education and workforce policy and program work. Um, I'll just preface it by saying this. I'm trying to remember Danielle and Cosby, you might have to help me. If we did this uh as far back as when Governor Kemp was about to run for governor. So this would have been what, 8, 9 years ago. I'm not sure we were doing these back then, but it's if we didn't, then I'll say it for the first time, which is it's a really odd year that we're moving into with all of the state representatives, state senators up as per usual every 2 year, but now also all of the statewide offices, but a governor who is term limited and is leaving office. So we have the top spot open at the state level, as well as most of the statewide offices with a non-incumbent. So there's going to be a lot of people running in primaries for those different roles, which means at the state legislature, there's going to be some, what's the right word? Brinksmanship, showmanship, maybe to try to keep a name or keep a headline for things that are important for those individuals and their prospective campaigns. And then, of course, at the end of session, we have qualifying for those offices that individuals want to run for. So it's a very odd year. We also have a U.S. Senate race, which will be overshadowing a lot of things. So before I dive into issues, Cosby, anything you want to add to the year we're about to walk into?
No, I think you are making it a very clear kind of what the session will look like. I want to give a shout out because apparently Tim quarter zips are in this season, so we are looking cool. We were just already here, so I'm glad that our quarter zip game is up already. Going into the 26th session, yeah, I want to back up everything that Tim is saying. Maybe give a little bit of context. We've already seen kind of those tectonic plates start to shift, especially in the Senate. For those of you who are working on issues or have issues before the legislature, just being honest, we are in a biennial session. This is the second year of that biennial session. For those of you who may not know, which is 2 years in our session, and so all bills are still alive. If you were working on pieces of legislation and those pieces of legislation maybe made it out of the House and are in the Senate, it's almost like starting over. A lot of Senate leadership has decided to vacate their seats so that they can continue to raise money and continue to campaign into the 26th season. For many people who may not know, our legislators cannot raise money during the legislative season. So for those people in the midst of those heavy kind of primaries, they are making a decision to go ahead and vacate their seats. We have people like, Senator Kennedy, who is running for lieutenant governor, and others. Because of that, we have kind of a lot of new leadership in the Senate. A couple people to keep your name on or to keep your eye on is leader Jason Anavatarte. Many of us probably have worked on with him on education issues. He's been around those issues for a little bit. He is now the leader of the majority caucus in the Senate. And then Senator Larry Walker was elected as president pro tem of the Senate. And so those are names you've maybe heard before because we've done a little work with them. But to show that exactly what Tim is saying, that leadership shift is happening, especially in the Senate, that if we have kind of priorities in front of the Senate, it's going to be a lot of re-education on those topics and having them fully understand what they're doing. We have a lot of good senators still in place. Senator Billy Hickman, who's the chair of youth and education over there, is there. I just spent some time with him. And so he's locked in and understands the issues, but leadership, we may have to do a little work making sure that they are up to date on those issues as they move through. But Tim, you hit the nail on the head. 26 is going to be a big session about kind of pontificating big ideas and kind of setting the standard for maybe what certain individuals want to run on, or maybe what parties want to run on as well. So a lot of kind of planting the flag on a lot of issues, maybe not a lot of things being done, maybe not a lot of bills actually being passed, but maybe a lot of committee hearings that we're going to have to make sure that we're there at.
Yeah, nailed it, Cosby. For the context, I think most of the folks on this call probably already know, but just to reiterate, there is Republican control of both chambers, House and Senate, as well as the state level, statewide offices, so governor, state school superintendent, etc. Um, the House had a little bit of a surprise this last
Hmm.
Tuesday with a special election in Oconee and part of Athens, Clark County, uh, where we had a Democrat that made it across the line, which was a little unexpected, I think. So, um, I don't know. My gut says they probably will talk about redistricting during legislative session. Don't know what that'll hold. Probably depends on a lot of other factors like DC, what's happening in DC and things like that. So that would be one of the topics that will probably be talked about, if not debated, during the next year's session. The one I wanted to bring up is the one that we've seen in a lot of rhetoric, what potential candidates are talking about, which is income tax, and sort of the changing of the income tax rate. For those of you that might not be aware, Georgia has one of the lowest effective tax rates, or one of the most competitive, as that we would say, effective tax rates. But there's always talk about taking our income tax, which has been steadily lowering, by the way. I think since Governor Deal was in office, that has been slowly ramping down. But now there's talk about completely eliminating it and possibly going to like a Tennessee or Florida style of state tax and or state sales tax and property tax, sort of filling in that gap. Anything I missed around that, Cosby?
Oh man, Daniela probably should talk about this more than me, but I'm just gonna jump in on the pure political side of it. Governor Kemp, when he came in, said that he wanted to lower the tax rate to under 5%. We are on a schedule to have that happen this session. Very much so, it seems like the House is happy with that. They are not at least from what I've heard from the Speaker, House leadership, Chairman of Ways and Means, they are not interested kind of in anything eliminating the income tax, and they want to stay on the ramp that we've been on, which is a smart decline of it, but not just completely getting rid of it. The way the House kind of talks about this in the tongue-in-cheek manner is saying that they must remind the Senate that all tax bills start in the House so that they don't have any idea how the Senate could take lead on something like that. That's the way they kind of joke about it. But that being said, there has been a extremely powerful study committee that has been meeting over the break on it. They've had a lot of talking points, but Danielle, I think you'd back me up in saying they have not come to anything concrete that we have seen as far as them putting it in front of the legislature. The one thing that's important for people on this call is from Senator Hickman, who's the head of education in the Senate, and other educational leaders throughout the legislature, they are ringing the bells of how much this funds education. And so they are clearly and directly saying to even their own leadership that if this is something that you guys are seriously thinking about, you need to show us how it's going to replenish education dollars and how those education dollars can continue to grow. The ideas to eliminate that income tax is getting rid of kind of, our corporate tax credits in some places, but also the overarching idea is to move to a more consumption tax basis. One of the things that the speaker said when we were together a couple of days ago is when in talking about Tennessee, he said, the best way to get rid of your income tax is to never have one. And so the states that we are looking at have never had an income tax. So it's kind of hard to untie the ball of yarn that is kind of our tax makeup. I do believe a lot of senators, including Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, may be kind of ringing that bell. We've seen Chairman Blake Tillery be really forthright that he wants some kind of bill. My guess would be that we may see a bill either move out of the committee in the Senate, maybe move out of the Senate, but I don't know how much traction any kind of bill from that in that space would be looked at in the House. So it will be something that takes up a lot of oxygen during the session, and for us in the education space, I think it will be extremely important for everyone on this call to continue to back up our education partners in the legislature, saying if we are even going to start to think about it, the first thing you need to show us is how we fund education in a real way for generations to come. So
And I'll just kind of add on Cosby. 48% of the state's revenue comes from the income tax. So again, I think Cosby, to your point, if this is going to be a shift, this is a substantial amount of the state's revenue and it's going to have major implications. And to Tim's point, Georgia has the eighth lowest tax burden in the country. So we really are a great place. We are not kind of, in a space where we're overburdened. We're one of the absolute lowest. So it's something, again, that we continue to hear from our member companies that when residents and their talent moves to Georgia, that they're able to really benefit from that low tax burden, and it keeps Georgia really competitive. So completely agree, just doubling down. So, but absolutely, this is going to become a big part of what we talk about next year. So not necessarily always education specific, but this is one of those, again, it's going to really kind of dominate and has a lot of things in terms of like funding. Um, what
and
else? Go ahead, Cosby.
no, I was going to say on taxes, one of the things that I wanted to throw out there, for our education partners, especially for those who maybe work with local school systems, the House is extremely focused on property tax. They are going to do something in the property tax space. I feel like the education community felt blindsided by House Bill 581, and it put a lot of strain on local mayors and commissioners and school boards to either opt in or opt out of that piece of legislation. There were, and Danielle and Tim, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, there were some pretty substantial school systems that opted out of House Bill 581. It could have been because they already had their own kind of tax credits or tax rebates on the board. But the reason I say that is because The House is going to do something else in the property tax space that does seem to have some legs, especially in House leadership, and it does seem to have some support in the Senate as well. So, all of us knowing that local school systems are funded off of property tax, it'd be good for us to maybe connect with your local school systems or whoever you work with to tell them to keep their eye kind of on those property tax measures and how they will be affecting maybe your bottom line locally and what will be happening on the ground there.
Cosby, I think that's great advice. And I'm really appreciative that you're helping connect the dots. Make sure you're talking with your local officials, especially your mayors, because we love mayors, especially the one in Brunswick, who is Cosby. But really think about the school board. Again, that full talent and workforce pipeline, we know so much of this is dependent on each other. So really thinking about what are those things that your community needs to be successful, is super important. So Tim Cosby, you know, what other things are maybe not specifically workforce related, but you think may kind of take up some of the conversation and oxygen in the room and maybe kind of just impact how session goes? I think we've talked about elections is going to be huge. That's going to be something that really dictates the calendar and the fact that we are going to hear a little bit more rhetoric probably from both sides. But are there other issues that y'all see kind of being top of mind that maybe aren't education or workforce specific?
Yeah, there's two that I think are tangential or adjacent. One is affordability for higher education. There's a study committee that's been meeting around that. I haven't seen like concrete proposals come out of that, but it is certainly something that a lot of the legislators are interested in tackling. Um, I'm I haven't heard any concrete stuff as far as like how they want to tackle it, but it probably will be part of the conversation, certainly. Similar to that, housing affordability is in that same kind of space. There were some bills and interest around that last year, but I would expect both those issues to come back and to be around. I don't know exactly where those will start. I've kind of heard both House and Senate members in the majority talking about these particular issues. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Certainly, has been top of mind for the chancellor and the regents on the university system and making sure that they're trying to control costs as much as they can within their realm. But like many of the businesses that we work with, they're struggling with the same issues. It's both cost of living and the cost of doing business and salaries and everything else that normal companies have to deal with, colleges and universities also have to deal with. So there's lots of questions around how to tackle both of those things, both affordability from a state perspective, certainly, and what belongs at local, what belongs at federal, all of those things, I would expect would be out in the debatable universe for next year, and certainly top of mind for a lot of the constituents of those representatives and senators.
Just to tag on a couple um, that I'm just seeing here, and I think Tim set us up at the beginning very honestly. Anybody who could tell you what's going to happen in 26, they're lying. Like we are just trying to get you guys in the general areas that we could be hearing some things out of. And that's really because of the, gutting of Senate leadership. We usually can kind of go in before a session, have had conversations with three or four leaders out of the majority caucus on the Senate and House side, see what's matching up where there's some synergy, but there just isn't those people kind of on the Senate side right now. Um, Two areas that I've heard just a little kind of talk around is number one, insurance reform. The House put together a kind of study committee around insurance reform to ensure that there was a cause and effect relationship between tort reform. If you guys remember last year, we might have talked about tort reform on this call. You know what I mean? We were telling everybody about tort reform. But I think one of the interesting things is the House said that they wanted to see kind of a direct effect of that tort reform on the insurance market. We were happy to see, I think it was State Farm a couple of days ago, announced that they are lowering their premiums by about 10%, which equals a $400 million savings to individuals who are insured with State Farm here in the state. The speaker said very openly that he's going to be looking for other insurance companies to follow to show that there is that cause and effect. If they don't see that or see that in a way maybe that they deem, then we may start to see a couple of bills around insurance reform. And of course, that affects school systems, businesses, anybody that's kind of in the insurance market. So that's something maybe to keep your eye on. The other kind of hot button issue, and I won't say that there will be specifically any kind of legislation around it, but we should keep our eye on it, is the data center discussion. Um, and the reason that's to me so important is because on the background of the conversation around data center is really about resource management, management of power, management of water, management of kind of the resources that affect local communities. And you know, all of the good business partners are at the table. This isn't something that they are trying to avoid or dodge. Major, you know, major employers such as Georgia Power and others are at the table having conversation about what it means to provide energy in the future and what it looks like. And data centers are also at the table trying to figure out the best way for us as a state to manage our resources along with the growth in that space. So that's just a space. I think we all know data centers affects every single one of us, and that's something that we may just want to keep our eye on as they continue kind of to chip away at it. And the last thing for me, and the reason this is kind of connected to education, is over the past maybe, I would probably say 6 months, but I'm stretching it out to 18 months to include my local community. We've lost tens of thousands of forestry jobs. Um, the speaker is dead set on figuring out how we re-employ those people and get those people back to work. That is probably going to be an extreme test of Georgia's ability to upskill generational workers in a space and get them shifted into a new kind of concrete place of employment. So that's a space that we'll watch. Again, I don't think there'll be legislation, but I know Daniela Chris has demanded that our organization be at that table. And I would definitely put it in the hands of anybody on this call that has really great ideas about upskilling, helping to upskill and helping people change and transition careers. Reach out to the speaker's office, reach out to House leadership, and give us a call. We'll make sure that we try and connect some kind of dots because they're definitely working on that space, and you'll probably see some state dollars kind of flow in that space as well.
Yeah, and it dawned on me too when you were talking about dollars. One of the context pieces we should lay out is that the governor has issued a no increase guidance for next year, which means what he's asking is for the state agencies that submit budgets, or submit budget requests, I should say, as part of the overall state budget. And I'm trying to remember the number. It's something like 51 different sources have different budgetary requests they can put in. So it's all the acronyms, right? So you've got Department of Ed, Department of Labor. You got all of the mini acronyms that all submit budget requests, but they've been asked to keep those flat for next year. There's always changes to that, and not every line item is kept exactly the same, but that request has gone out from the governor to his agencies that he oversees to keep that flat.
And Tim, I think that's a great point. I will add on to kind of what Cosby shared. We've had a number of calls with the Forestry Association and some partners to think about how do we start developing some of the workforce pipelines now. I think the long-term picture is very bright for, everything that we can do for the forestry industry, especially thinking about sustainable aviation fuel, a lot of things. We've got great partnerships with our universities and that full research pipeline that we're so fortunate to have with so many R1 universities in the state. But I think too, to Cosby's point, how do we help folks kind of in the shorter term get into good, these folks are really skilled, great things, but a lot of these communities are smaller, and so we want to think about how do we support those. So absolutely. And the forestry industry is so critical to our state, and I think too the even more challenging part is that a lot of these forest landowners were really impacted by Helene, and so this is kind of just like another like slap in the face of what all they've had to manage. I will too add on what Cosby shared around the resource management piece. There's been some study committee activity too in the off season or special committee. It's had a few different subcommittees too. One is on like water usage, and so I think we will continue to see a lot of conversations about resource management. Of course, want to make sure everyone remembers too, kind of that the PSC put in some new rules and regs in the last year, saying if you're a large load user, you're going to be paying kind of for that increased rate rather than kind of a normal consumer. So the PSC is certainly kind of part of this, and I think that's kind of part of the conversation too, is how does the PSC's rulemaking get interwoven with the legislature's desire to have a seat at the table to legislate some of this. So again, no one's going to be bored. If you need something to do or hang out, we'll have plenty for y'all to think about. So a lot going on that's not necessarily workforce, but I think has lots of tie-ins to long-term demands, long-term needs. How are we thinking about growing industries in the state? What are those things that y'all are hearing though that maybe more like workforce specific or education specific, things that folks are really thinking about? And I do want to remind everybody, this is the second year of our biennium. So legislation that was alive last year is still alive this year. So that's going to kind of impact things too from a speed perspective and where we go. But it'll be something that certainly is important. So Cosby, you want to start there? I know we've got that second chance hiring thing that we've been pushing with the Georgia Justice Project for a few years. Tim, I know y'all have been good partners on that too. But what things should people be mindful of that are kind of more talent and workforce specific?
I'm glad you let me go first because every time I go after Tim, you know what I mean? He gives such a good thing. I'm like, I don't have anything else to say, literally. So thank you. You're letting me go first on education. I'm just gonna go two quick things and then I'm gonna throw it to Tim. The first one is literacy, literacy, literacy. Uh, First Lady of the House, Bill Burns, as well as Chairman Hickman have both been very clear that they're going to do something additional this session. I know last session we changed curriculum stuff around literacy. They are very much hype on that, but the continued work and the continued focus on literacy will be something that we will see both out of House leadership and Senate leadership. Not sure what that piece of legislation looks like, or if that's an investment, or what that is. That's something that we'll be looking at for sure. The next thing that I've heard brought up from Senate leadership is Senator Hickman's bill to move kindergarten back to the age of 5. That bill has been drafted, and it's something that Chairman Hickman is very focused on and something that he wants to get done. I'm not going to say it's going to get done. He's obviously been having conversations about what the effect on the budget will be and getting that fiscal note. There's also a long road ahead of what implementation would look like and things of that nature. But it seems like he's on the he's a dog on that trail. So I'm sure we'll hear about it at least out of Senate leadership. In the other one that I had is the Senate Bill 207, which is second chance hiring. Second chance hiring is something that Tim has worked on. Nancy, who's the head of our team, has worked on. I wonder, and I'll lean and I'll pass it over to Tim here. I'll wonder what it'll look like now that Senator Strickland is running for Attorney General. I know he was the tip of the spear on that bill, so I don't know if we kind of have another person willing to get up under the weight of that and drag it across the finish line in the House. But we were surely glad to be working with Senator Strickland for a long time to ensure that people who kind of come through the justice system have some kind of transparent pipeline to get back to work. And I think that is it still needs to be worked on, and I know Tim will be there, we'll be there, trying to get that thing across the finish line.
Yeah, that's a good point, Cosby. That's a that I think coupled with occupational licensing reform are two big workforce things that don't sound real flashy, like from a larger population. Certainly folks on this call, we get very into it. But if you're talking about larger population, they don't make the news a lot, but they do have long-term impacts for future workforce. Just that ability. I think every time somebody mentions occupational licensing reform, my mind goes immediately to military spouses because I know they've been very out and vocal on this issue. And the ability to move every type of licensing that the state does from, cosmetology to nurse assistant to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's a long list. For those credits or those licenses to transfer from state to state without requiring each state to do an individual compact with every single other state, which is ridiculous just from a workforce perspective. So I'm glad it's still in the conversation. Sky Park on our team. If you guys have met her, she's an absolute whiz when it comes to the legal side of this, and our team relies on her so much to keep these issues forward and center and to really what would we say in lobbying term, work the halls on those consistently and make sure that legislators know that business community is very interested and very behind um, fixing both of those issues, whether the second chance is hiring or occupational licensing. The other one related to education, I would expect to be talked about, but I don't know if there's momentum for it, is teacher pay. I know it seems like we just did this because I think 3 years ago we were talking about it on this call. But if you think about just the pace of wage growth, particularly in the private sector, those events that happened 3 years ago are now woefully out of date when it comes to salary range. So I would expect that our school systems will make sure that that is raised back to the front since they're all struggling with it right now. Um, so I absolutely expect that to be part of the conversation, both at the higher ed level, but really at the K-12 level. Um, the other issue, if I can throw one more in, it's not necessarily direct education related, but that's around healthcare and rural hospitals. I think will come back. I feel like we keep going to this well almost every year, but not really getting the correct fix. Uh, and also Washington and what Congress is doing is or not doing more appropriately is going to impact that conversation next year. So you've got the changes for ACA and whether those subsidies stay in place or not is definitely going to drive some of the healthcare conversation here and what Georgia is doing with the pathways to prosperity. Hope I'm saying that correctly. On the Medicaid side, like what we're doing with that program, do we need to shore it up? Like, what do our rural hospitals need, assuming that these healthcare changes, because of what DC has done, take place? Like, how are they going to adapt to that, and what's that going to have for an impact? So there's a lot of sort of tangential things that are hitting workforce without them being directly workforce related next year. But I do think we have good opportunity on second chances and occupational licensing to move the ball down the court quite a good bit.
And Tim, I'm so glad you mentioned rural hospitals. Actually, our partners at Georgia Heart just reached out, and there actually is credits that are left available for 2025. So if you aren't familiar, I'll kind of put a link in the chat, but it's a great way for you to get some tax benefits and support our rural hospitals across the state, which so benefit from it. You can even select which one is yours, which one you want to think about and designate it to. So Cosby, I don't know if y'all technically are in that category, but lots of great hospitals and everyone benefits. And it is so important to think about the broader healthcare ecosystem, and it's a huge resource. So I'll put some stuff in the chat just for if you're interested in learning more or if you want to kind of take advantage. But you got a couple weeks. So in Christmas time, I feel like that's an eternity, or at least it will feel like that for those of us. But Cosby, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, no, I think the last couple things that I'll hit on maybe a little bit in the education space. And for those of you who are super deep in the education space, this may be old news to you, but it seems like there is some kind of differences brewing between some in majority leadership and maybe Superintendent Woods. The last four events that I've gone to, um, both Senate and House members have vocally said things out loud about some of the things that they would be hoping that office kind of attacks and works on. The areas that they talked about, and maybe this is just a push to kind of Superintendent Woods before they start doing things at the legislative level. But a couple of the things that they talked about was number one, chronic absenteeism is a big thing that I've heard at least mentioned everywhere that I went. So I don't know if it's kind of majority time. What's going on? We got the best person on the call now.
Sorry, y'all, working mom, work sick kiddo today. But
um, I don't know if that's kind of just a signal, but chronic absenteeism is something that they're going to be working on. And the other one was cell phones in the classrooms. So I don't know how that affects anybody in this call. It could just be kind of, window dressing. But if it does, I have heard them talk about those two issues. And I don't know if, again, that's a push to Superintendent Woods to kind of, do something in that space, or if they are saying legislatively they're going to move beyond what they've already done with cell phones in classrooms. And I don't know really how they get into the legislatively get into chronic absenteeism, but that may be coming. I'm not sure.
and they have
Yeah,
had
the
that
apps.
study committee. Tim, have y'all tracked that a lot this year?
Only tangentially, just because we're still waiting for like a concrete proposal. Like what is it that they're actually proposing to do? It seems it's kind of in the exploratory phase right now. We did have some school districts last year that put hard policies in place. I think like Marietta City Schools and some of the others where they put I think it was for certain age ranges from where it's middle school, but they put cell phone restrictions in place. So there's probably going to be some testifying down at the legislature from those school districts about, what's the impact, what's the day-to-day look like. For any of you who are Abbott Elementary fans and haven't seen the cell phone ban day episode yet, I highly recommend you go watch it. It's not only entertaining, but it's also a little bit of a great policy lesson about what happens when you put these things in place for the adults and the kids in the classroom. But yeah, that one will definitely be back. So do you mind if can I move on to some other like short topics around education?
Yes, I did. I was curious about y'all's thought around childcare. I know again that was part of some of those recommendations that Chairman Strickland had last year.
Yeah.
Again, with him not being, him kind of running for Attorney General, how y'all see that factoring in.
Yeah, so we had some tax credit changes at the state level last year. Just kind of surprisingly, with the one big beautiful bill in DC, they also had federal changes around the child care tax credit at the federal level. So we kind of had two things happening at the same time. Um, yeah, I would expect there'll be more conversation around that, around whether anything needs tweaked with the childcare legislation that was passed last year. There's always continued conversation around pre-K, and what the state does with pre-K. How do we make sure that the slots we have available are covering the families that need it. Do we need to expand that to 3-year-old? There's 3-year-old pre-K. There's always those sort of annual conversations around that I think are good. I'm glad they're always in the sphere of possibility for what could happen. For childcare, similar, we talked earlier about just the cost of doing business on the salary side, and that is one area, childcare and the cost of doing childcare and personnel and infrastructure for that, even in family-based childcare centers or family-based childcare businesses, is really rough. Um, this is Tim's perspective on this. Not necessarily the chambers, but Tim's perspective is we just haven't kept pace with where the market has gone over the last few years and the costs of providing that type of business. So the state has some hard look to do about whether we're just going to keep the funding at the level that we are, particularly for the child and parent subsidy program, which is CAPS, which is our low income working parent subsidy for childcare program. And then how do we tie all of these things together? You've got the CAPS program, which is mostly federally funded, not entirely. And then you've got the tax credits, you've got the other parts that the state and the federal units put in. It's a big mishmash of private and public service delivery. Like, how do we put these together in a way that makes sense for families and businesses? And the thing I always look for is when legislators propose changes that actually have incremental change, right? So they don't have to keep coming back each year and fixing the same problem over and over, or come back every other legislative session and fix a budget line item for education, for childcare, but where there are systems put in place where those things automatically adjust, whether that's according to cost of living or cost of doing business or whatever the structure is for that. But I will be looking for that over the next couple of years when we talk about childcare to see. That's always my signal to me that the state's getting really serious about fixing this perennial problem, that we take it seriously. So I do think there'll be some things that come out of that study committee from last year that need to be adjusted or need to be tackled again this year. So I'm looking forward to those conversations.
I think that's super helpful, Tim. And I think too, obviously, the importance of early learning. If we want to have, prepared learners in kindergarten, we need to make those investments on the front end so that they're ready to hit the ground running and strong third grade literacy rates, like Cosby is mentioning. So it's certainly all connected. Anything else kind of from a, talent workforce that y'all kind of see coming down the pipe? I know there's a lot that is kind of unknown, and certainly for anybody that's joined, if y'all got questions for Tim or Cosby, as we start to a little closer to the end, feel free to drop them in the chat. But what else do y'all kind of see from a talent perspective as being top?
Cosby, I'm looking at you.
I was gonna say, I think Tim hit on everything that I would have um, in that space. The only other space that I would kind of maybe say keep your eye on, on the side is the any discussions around artificial intelligence. AI is obviously something I think every state and local community is trying to figure out how to get its hands around. I think one of the things that, and especially AI in education and its uses and where it makes sense. I feel like where the Georgia Chamber has been, and Daniela, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong, is like, we want to continue to work with our federal partners to make sure that there is some kind of federal standard guiding whatever standards would be put in place by a state or, God forbid, local communities thinking they should be doing some kind of AI structuring. But I do think artificial intelligence will at least be a conversation at the Capitol during this session. I don't know, again, if there will be any kind of legislative policy focus. in the area. But I do know it's an area a lot of legislators have interest in, and it'll continue to be talked about.
Absolutely, and I know the administration's made a number. The federal administration has made some moves, as we've also seen various U.S. senators introduce legislation. So, probably more to come.
Mhm.
Again, we'll be busy in 26. As we see if there's any questions from attendees, Tim, Cosby, just any kind of words of wisdom. I feel like y'all are both institutions at the Capitol. You've seen so much, and I think we are all so glad to be working so well together, to have a unified business community, really thinking about how do we move things forward for our communities, our businesses, job seekers, everyone to think about a more effective and efficient system to build up families and communities. But anything just to words of wisdom, good news, anything that we've, good surprises.
I
I think
would
that
say, sorry, go ahead, you ask me.
No, I was just going to say, I think the one thing to keep in mind is there may not be a lot of legislation this session, but be a part of the conversations
Yeah.
because the conversations this year are extremely important. And for those of you who have lobbyists, if you don't, I'll put my number in the chat. You just give us a call. We'll be your lobbyist. But for those of you who have lobbyists, um, I would say ensure that they're having the conversations with those who are running for office. We got a lot of people who have already announced, from lieutenant governors to governors, on both sides. So I would say, set those meetings and make sure that you're lobbying and getting the things of importance, not only in front of those people during the 40 days of session, but also use that time to get to those who are running and make sure they understand what's important to your organizations as well.
And on it too, I know there's been some folks too for superintendent position. There's been some folks that have announced their intention as well. So there's also that. Tim, words of wisdom.
The one I'll say because it fills my social media's timelines when I'm in session, which is just because a bill is introduced doesn't mean it's going anywhere. So there's a lot of folks that love to try to create a viral moment by saying, "You'll never guess what Georgia did. They just introduced a bill," and then fill in the blank. Because there are some out there ideas and some we'll call them bold. There's some very bold ideas that get introduced every year, but it doesn't mean that that bill is going anywhere. So just always take that with a grain of salt when somebody's trying to get your neck hairs up about something. It doesn't mean that it's a serious piece of legislation. So you always kind of look to the leadership and the committee chairs and the chambers to what's actually moving, and what has support and what doesn't have support. So I would say that's always one
Yeah.
advice I would give is don't freak out about everything. Freak out about the things that are actually moving and things that actually have traction. And I'll do the perennial reminder that 95% ish of the legislation that passes is solid, decent, run-of-the-mill legislation. A lot of attention gets put on the 4 or 5% of the ones that actually have division. So keep that in mind. There's always small things that we all need and rely on to get fixed, changed, added, that move. And we certainly appreciate that work happening. And the tough fights, don't get me wrong. There will be some good tough fights, especially around budget and trying to protect the things that we all care about in education and workforce and our families. So that's it. Just keep the heads cool and rely on the people that know what they're doing.
I think that's a great point. We all do a lot of defense, that again is not, doesn't really hit the news cycle, but that's a lot of what we do is make sure that all the good stuff that's supposed to happen continues to. So if y'all got questions about, again, what's moving, where, when should I kind of raise the alarm, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll be happy to kind of help guide y'all through some of those conversations. But again, Tim, Cosby, thank y'all so much for sharing as much as we are able to predict this time of the year. And Tim, thanks for putting the education tax credit. It's a great way to, if y'all are trying to think about the rest of 2025, these are great ways to support our workforce pipeline. Um, so again, I hope y'all have a great rest of your Friday. And I'm going to make sure that we hit all the things we need to. So again, if you are not a Max member, these are some of the great benefits that we offer. Feel free to reach out to Joy Wilkins, who is a great resource to kind of walk you through all this and what membership looks like. We've got our next Max Academy on January 22nd, and Marion Phillips, who is our newest member to the Max Executive Committee, going to help provide an update on economic development activity. And I'm really excited. Marion always does a great job doing that. So please join us on January 23rd. We're also excited that Chris Kidd with the University System of Georgia is going to be taking over for Max Minutes. So please give Chris a very warm welcome. We are really excited for him to serve Max and the board well. Thanks to our anchors. And then again, Tim, Cosby, thank you for your continual partnership. I know we love working together during session and in the off season. So I hope y'all have a great rest of December. And again, hope everyone has a happy and healthy 2025 and look forward to working with everyone in the new year.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Happy
y'all.
Thank
holidays.
See
you
ya.
guys.